And I remember like a couple days before that, I was sitting in my car and I was screaming from the top of my lungs. That's how angry I was. My voice was kind of hoarse for a few days after that. Like, what have you been doing the whole year? You're telling me now that I've been sending you tracks for a year and you had like, what, you didn't do anything with it? I opened the gate and there were corpses everywhere. It was like a massacre. I was like, what the hell happened here? Is life trying to tell me something? Is life trying to tell me like, don't do the record, don't make it? And there was a mistake. It was a nightmare come true. I wanted to take all of those CDs, go out in the garden, set them on fire, and have nothing to do with this record ever again. I was like, why is this happening to me? Hi guys, Romans here, and welcome to the Everything That Went Wrong with Persons in Life 2 video. I kind of hinted at this video with the studio documentary of Persons in Life 2, and this is kind of like an additional video. So if you haven't seen studio documentary, I would recommend watching it first, as this will sort of fill in a few blanks and give you a bigger picture, so to speak. This is also the last video I'm making for Persons in Life 2, and one thing I was talking about in the studio documentary was comparing the process of making Persons in Life 1 and 2, and if I had to sum it up with one word difference, Persons in Life 1 was effortless, Persons in Life 2 was effortful. Unbelievable how many things went wrong, how difficult it was to pull it off together. This video will be like a series of stories to share. Let's start. What you might have noticed already is that Persons in Life 2 has a completely different lineup than the first album. I kinda explained some of it in the Hows and Whys of Iako Bei. The saxophone player on the first album, Nico, he basically went abroad and he hasn't lived in Slovakia since then, so that's the reason why he's not in the band anymore. Stevie Hart quit music at the end of 2019, and basically in summer 2020 I had a gig. This was an interesting gig because kind of like the lineup of the first album and the lineup of the second album, they sort of like intertwined. There was Tibor, the drummer from the first album, Lucas, who would end up recording saxophone on the second album, and the random keyboard player. This was the lineup that I thought was gonna record Persons in Life 2. Before summer 2020, until the end of the year, I put together 4 songs, 4 demos: Distant Faces in the Dark, Fan Haters, Lonely Crossings, and My Biggest Foe. Whenever I finished the song, I would send it to everybody so that they could get familiar with songs, start coming up with their parts, rehearsing them, whatever. At the end of 2020, I found out that the Slovak Arts Council was gonna support my second album, Persons in Life 2, with quite a significant amount of money. So I called the drummer Tibor, who was kind of giving me mixed signals in terms of whether he wanted to continue or not. So I called him in December and I was like, look, I will get the money, so I need to know whether I can count with you or not. He didn't really want to do progressive rock and progressive metal music. Basically, he was out of the band. Then throughout December and in January 2021, I was calling a lot of drummers. There were a few high-profile drummers in Slovakia who are basically professionals and fantastic players who showed interest in playing on a record. The problem was that I didn't want them just to record the album. I wanted them for the future photo shoot, for the music videos, for the gigs, basically to be a band member. They just didn't have time for that. So I actually contacted William Staniek, who ended up recording the second album. He had been playing with a lot of groups and a lot of bands. And one of the reasons why he joined the band was that, just try to remember, the end of 2020, the early 2021, that was basically the COVID's peak. He hadn't been in any band for quite some time, and I think he wanted just to be part of a group. He wanted to be part of some project. So that's why he actually agreed on it, even though eventually, as COVID sort of disappeared, or maybe the restrictions and all of that stuff, he started having more and more gigs and more stuff to do. He kind of got into the same point as all of those high-profile drummers that, yeah, I made a record and basically that's it. But I'm gonna get back to it. The keyboard player who played with us in summer 2020, I had been sending him all the demos, all of the tracks from Persons in Life 2 for about a year. So I think this was in like June, after we had already recorded drums. A lot of the bass guitars had already been recorded as well. And he was supposed to come to my place, and he called me and he was like, well, I'm not sure if I can make it. I was like, what, you want to come next week or a week after that? And he was like, no, I mean the record. I'm like, the record? Like, what have you been doing the whole year? You're telling me now that I've been sending you tracks for a year and you had like, what, you didn't do anything with it? So I had to find a new keyboard player, and my mom had a colleague, and basically her son was a piano player, so she told me like, try to call him. I knew that he was like 15 years old, and I was like, I don't know if I want to have a 15-year-old kid on my record. Like, this is a mature music, I want some mature musicians. But I was kind of out of options, so I called him, and that's Shimon, or Simon, who actually ended up recording the second album, and he also appeared in almost all of the music videos. He kind of saved the band a little bit because yeah, It was very difficult to find a keyboard player at that point. We're off to a good start, aren't we? Okay, so when it comes to the studio, after that weekend spent in studio in May where we recorded drums, I think if I remember correctly, I booked the studio for a week in like middle of July or the third week of July, something like that. And just try to remember that it was an extremely difficult life situation for me at that point because I was going to work. Obviously, I had a daily job. I still do. We were building the house where we live, and that took a lot of time. Plus, I had a little kid. Put making the record into this equation, and you get a recipe for madness. Obviously, in summer, I already had summer holidays as a teacher, and I was working on the record a lot, but I knew that I wasn't going to finish the record by the third week of July, so I called Roman. We postponed the studio for, I think, the first week of August, and even then, I just couldn't really finish the record in time. So I remember I was kind of afraid because it's not that easy to postpone the studio time. You've got a lot of other projects, a lot of other bands waiting for the time. So usually it's quite difficult. And I called Roman. I was genuinely scared. I was like, Roman, is it okay if we postpone the studio one more time for like the third week of August? And he's a very cool guy. He was like, don't worry about it. I've got so much work to do, so many projects to work on. It's even better for me. And the third week of August was the last week I could really book because as a teacher, we have summer holidays in July and August, but basically I still have to go to work in the first week of July. And we already have to go back to work in the last week of August. So that third week of August was really the last time window in a way. But because it was so hard to balance like personal life and time with my son and working on the house and working on a record, a couple days before that third week of August, it just became very apparent to me that I wasn't going to be able to finish the record. I didn't want to call Roman again to postpone the studio. Plus, I didn't even know like when to postpone it to because we could only go for the weekends from that moment on. And I remember like a couple days before that, I was sitting in my car and I was screaming from the top of my lungs. That's how angry I was. My voice was kind of hoarse for a few days after that. So we went to the studio as planned. I think that at that point, obviously all of the drums had been recorded. I think all of the bass guitar had been recorded. I think all of the saxophone, probably like 90 to 95% of keyboards and synths. The only thing that hadn't been finished were the vocals. Vortex Fragoris and My Biggest Foe were the two tracks I didn't actually get around to record the vocals for. And yeah, it's just 2 songs out of 8, but together they take up half of the record in their running time. Actually, when we came to the studio, we only spent 3 days in the studio, not the whole week, because on the third day, at the end of it, Roman looked at me and said, we've done everything we could have. We worked on everything you brought here, so come back when you have more. And I think that I came back sometime in September. I still remember that in October, my wife's twin sister had a wedding, and we had to travel 4 or 5 hours to get there. There was the whole wedding, and for that weekend, I had the studio booked. I couldn't go there on Saturday when there was a wedding, but after the wedding at night, I went back home, and on Sunday in the morning, I woke up, I traveled to the studio, and I came back. It was like 11 or 12 hours of driving on that weekend, and that was crazy. This is a dedication that you will probably find in no one else, because it's crazy. Another interesting thing was that at that time we were still living in the house of my wife's parents. In summer 21 we were 1 year away from actually moving to the house where we live now. I remember this was on Sunday in June. The next day Lucas, the saxophone player, was supposed to come to my home studio to record his saxophone parts, and actually I thought that I was gonna record the whole album in their house because with the bass guitar and with the keyboards it wouldn't really matter because you can't really hear that, but with acoustic instruments like the vocals and the saxophone it probably would be much more difficult. So I actually asked them one night before he was supposed to arrive, like, is it okay if I have backing vocalists here and some musicians to record the album? They weren't very happy about it, and honestly, you know, I should have asked them weeks in advance and not one night before he arrived. So that was very stupid on my part. Plus, having experienced the whole album, I can't imagine it in their house. On that night, I still came to the house where we live, because basically this is like a double house. The front house, we didn't do anything with it, and then you have this L-shaped house, which we rebuilt and we live here. And I checked rooms, if there was any room where I could set up a studio. I'm no expert, and I wasn't looking for some secured rooms or anything where you have like foam and stuff. I just checked if there was any room where I could actually set up the equipment, but I wasn't really sold on the idea of recording there. And the next day in the morning, I was going to the train station, because the train station is like 15 minutes away from where I live. I was about to grab Lucas, and he had to travel like 2 hours to get to my place. And that's when Julie called me and said, well, my parents don't really want you to record there. And I was like, what am I gonna do? Like, where am I gonna record? And I thought about recording in my mom's flat. That would be even a worse idea. So eventually I decided, okay, we're gonna go to the house where we live. The front house, I'm gonna set up that room there, and That's it. It was something after 10 a.m. when Lucas arrived by train, so I took him, we came to Julie's parents' house, and I asked him like, is it okay if I grab my stuff? He was like, yeah, sure, no problem. It took me like 2 hours to pack everything. All of the recording equipment, all of the gear, the computer with everything, you know, like 2 hours. Then we came to the house, which was like 2 minutes or 3 minutes drive away because it's very close. I opened the gate and there were corpses everywhere. It was like a massacre. I was like, what the hell happened here? Corpses is a little strong term. There were like animal carcasses because we had 5 ducks. You have these slugs that can eat your vegetables and all of your crops. So basically you have ducks to get rid of the slugs. And I think that neighbor's dog found a hole in the fence and he climbed under it and he just tore apart all of our ducks. I'm not superstitious, but when I opened that gate and I saw this massacre, I was like, is life trying to tell me something? Is life trying to tell me like, don't do the record? Don't make it. Actually, Lucas ended up recording the pop songs on that day. My Biggest Foe, Lonely Crossings, and Golden Times. And on that day, my father-in-law with his brother and some other people, they came in and they took out all of the windows on this house where we live. Because the next day, we were supposed to have this company install new windows. I was actually a little scared in the afternoon because when everybody had left, I still had the equipment there. That L-shaped house that we were rebuilding, it had no windows and no front doors. So theoretically, anybody could get into the house. Of course, there was nothing in the house apart from some building materials and from some rubble and whatever. You could get from that house into the front house where I had my studio set up. And because there were no doors and I could not lock it, I didn't know what to do. Am I gonna stay here, sleep here overnight, or am I gonna take a few hours to take all the equipment away again? In that front house, we also had all of the doors that we put away. So I created this barricade from the doors so that theoretically nobody could get in. Yeah, it was totally crazy. Another thing that you might have noticed is that there's different lineup almost in every music video. So let me explain this. When we were supposed to shoot the first music video for Wrong Doors, which was in November 2021, I asked William to be in the music video because I wanted at least one music video to show the album's lineup. William, at that point, he had already let me know that I'm not going to be part of the band. I have other stuff. He's quite a funny guy. He even told me like, look, I'm not going to be in the music video. You need somebody good looking there. I don't look very good. But that was a problem. I didn't have a drummer. I have a friend called Latsi Meyering. I actually talked about him in the House and Wise of Iako Bei because I had my very first band with him. So I called him and asked him like, are you willing to be a drummer slash actor in a music video for Wrong Doors? And he was kind enough to appear in Wrong Doors and Pioneers of Modern Narcissism, and actually there's almost like a year between the shooting of the 2 music videos. And even with the music videos, like so many things went wrong, but I talked about it in the individual making of videos for the music videos. He was kind enough to appear in these 2 music videos, and then in summer 22 we had a gig where I found a new drummer, Jacob, and basically when he became part of the band, he appeared in almost all of the other music videos like Lonely Crossings, Fan Haters, Golden Times, and Distant Faces in the Dark. Also, when it comes to the saxophone players, there were like a lot of them. The first 2 music videos, again, Wrong Doors and Pioneers of Modern Narcissism, they have Lucas, who recorded the second album. And then when we were supposed to shoot Lonely Crossings, he got sick. After that, his priorities changed. He basically became a sound guy. I don't even think he plays saxophone anymore, but it was kind of a pickle because I didn't have a saxophone player. Just after I had found a drummer, I was in the need of a saxophone player. In Lonely Crossings, it was one of the Jacob's friends who appeared in the music video. I never really met the guy. Basically, since November until like May, we were trying to find a saxophone player. This is actually why in the music video for My Biggest Foe is just me driving in a car, because originally we had this really cool idea. I talk about it in the making of. There was a lot of choreography and the band and all of that stuff, but because there was no band, it's just me, so it was a very stripped down version of that original idea. And then we found one guy who was interested to be a saxophone player, but when we got to the point of shooting the music video for Fan Haters, he was at some sort of a competition. One of the people that I approached for the position of a saxophone player was this girl Bibiana, who actually ended up in the music video for Fan Haters. She didn't join the group because she actually moved to Czech Republic. She's studying medicine, so I don't think she really does music anymore. But she was interested in appearing in a music video, so that was cool. And after that, that guy that we had found, he was like, oh, you know, I want to do jazz, I don't want to do this. I was like, what the hell, man? And then we found this girl called Henriette, who ended up in the music video for Golden Times and Distant Faces in the Dark. And she actually showed interest in being in a band, but then a couple weeks before the gig in summer, she bailed out. She was like, I don't want to do it because, you know, blah, blah, blah. She had some excuses. I don't know. It was very random. Yeah, a lot of lineup changes, but I think what's admirable is that I kept going on. Show must go on. Another really kind of tragic thing for me is that there is this girl called Verza. Her name is Veronika. She's one of the best photographers in Slovakia. She usually is there when there's some rock or metal concert, and her photography is just perfect. She's a huge fan of the band as well, so I called her and I was like, I want you to take pictures of the band for the second album. And she's from the capital city of Slovakia, which is on the other side of the Republic. Originally, I wanted to find some cool place where the whole band would meet and we would shoot some photos there, but William, the drummer who did the second album, he was like, I'm not gonna travel anywhere. If you want to make band shots, let's do them in a studio. So I called her into the studio, and the studio is in this village that's pretty hardly accessible. So if she traveled by car, maybe she would arrive in like 4 hours. She traveled by train and there were a lot of in-between stops and it was just very complicated. It took her like 6.5 hours to arrive. This was that third week of August that I told you about. We spent 3 days in the studio, and on the third day she was supposed to arrive. So it was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 1 p.m. We were in the studio working on the Vortex Fragoris, the instrumental side of the song, because we didn't have the vocals at that point. And I told the whole band, like, she's already here, she's in some restaurant. After she finishes, she's gonna come here. And William looked at me and said, I have time only until 4 p.m, then I have to leave. And I was like, why are you telling me just now? Why didn't you tell me before? So I called her, I was like, can you come here as soon as possible? I think she came to the studio, it was maybe like 1:30 or 2 p.m, whatever, but you have to understand that it takes some time to set up the equipment, the lights, the camera, all of that stuff. She traveled so long to have like 90 minutes of photo shoot. It was just crazy. So all of the pictures that you can see actually of the band, there were a lot of pictures that we did, but only a few of them ended up in the booklet of the album. And after William had left, she started coming up with all of these great ideas, and I was like, oh my god, like, I have such a great photographer for such a limited time, such a waste. I was so disappointed. A fun fact, when you take out the CD from the digipack version of the CD, you can see 4 pictures of us, and these are very zoomed in pictures of each band member sitting in front of the main computer in the studio. And actually what you can see on the computer is the Ocean of Noise, part 5 of Vortex Fragoris. But that's not all. That's not all. Now we're going to 2023, and I think in May, I created this crowdfunding project, kind of like a Kickstarter, but a Slovak version. I think it's a Czechoslovakian version called StartLab. And the point of the project was to collect the money necessary for printing and manufacturing 300 CDs in the digipack format with a 24 pages long booklet. The project was successful. I collected the money, even though it was by a skin of a teeth, because I collected only a little bit over what was supposed to be collected. So when the project was successful, what I needed to do was to get together all the graphic stuff, all the audio stuff, send it to the manufacturing company, and have them make CDs. Maroš Suchý, who made both album covers and who did all of the graphic stuff for the first album, wasn't really available this time around because he was working on his house. I actually approached one of my students who was interested in editing and graphic design, and I was like, are you willing to take this job? And he was. The booklet was mostly finished actually, because with Maroš we almost finished the booklet in like September or October 21. This was like a year and a half later. And basically when you pay for having your CDs done, you send the graphic stuff and you have 2 revisions in the price. And the revision basically means that if everything is perfect, they will just tell you it's fine, we can make the CDs. If not, then they will send you basically some feedback where you have stuff that you need to change, because if you don't, they can't print it, and then stuff that you should change. They can still print the CDs, they can still manufacture them. If you don't change it, the quality is gonna be quite reduced. And I think that they returned the graphic stuff to us like 8 or 9 times. It was a recipe for a breakdown, honestly. That student of mine was pretty inexperienced, but I think that this was a pretty good lesson for him. He really learned everything. But this was in summer 2023. I had summer holidays, and there were so many occasions when I took my kids and my wife. We went to this place where you have like a healing thermal water, you know, where you have the swimming pool where you can swim. And as we were getting ready to go into the swimming pool, I got the email from the manufacturing company that we're sending the graphic stuff back. You still need to change this. We went like 5 times, and like 3 times this happened, and you have the whole day ruined. So eventually, I think in mid-August, the graphic stuff was finally good. And actually the guys at the AZCD are really cool guys. They gave me a good price. They helped me out a lot. They understood the situation. So that was the graphic stuff, and then you need to put together the audio stuff. So basically what information is going to be on the disc, you know, the tracks and all of that. So I asked Roman, who did both records, to do it, and he creates 2 files. I think it's disc image and ISO, but for some reason they couldn't read it in the manufacturing company. And then I remembered that when we recorded the Way to Oppose live, studio live video in the studio Lavagans back in 2018, the guy who was working there, he's one of the biggest producers actually in Slovakia, he created a DDP file. DDP DDP file is the most advanced file that you can send because it doesn't contain just the names of the tracks, but also like the authors, the genre, the codes for the tracks, the album cover, all of that. And he did it for the first album, so I called him, can you do DDP for the second album? He was like, yeah, no problem. He sent it to me, I sent it to the manufacturing company. They said, we can read it, it's fine. And in the middle of August, they were like, we can start making the CDs. I was like, finally. At the end of August, we had a gig and I really wanted the CDs to arrive before the gig so that I could check them out in terms of the quality. And on that day when we had a gig, I was just about to leave. I'm not making this up. This is exactly how it happened. I was just about to leave my house with all of the equipment in the car and go to the place where we were supposed to have a gig, because you have to arrive at least 2 hours in advance so that you can set up the equipment. That's when I got the call from the delivery guy who was like, I'll be there in a few minutes. I'm like, ugh. Could there be a better timing? I didn't have time to check the CD, so I just opened one. I checked the graphics, if everything was perfect, and graphically it all seemed perfect. But I didn't have time to listen to the CD, obviously. So I took 2 copies. I brought one to my wife and one to my mom. And I told them, please listen to the CDs, whether there are some mistakes or anything. My wife only got around to listen to the first track, which is almost 26 minutes long. And the only thing she wrote me like, the song gets really progressive towards the end, but it seems fine. I don't have time to listen to the rest. My mom listened to the whole CD because I told them to focus on some cracks. When we did the EP with my band Slip of the Lip back in 2015, we actually had this crack in one of the tracks and we found out too late to actually do anything about it. So my mom wrote me a message like, no cracks, nothing, everything works fine. I was like, okay, cool. So I sold a few CDs, everything's perfect. Next day in the morning I woke up, I took the CD, I listened to it, and there was a mistake. It was a nightmare come true. To kind of explain the mistake to you, what happened was, in the first track, Vortex Fragoris, it seems like the final minute of the track was moved back a minute, so that you have basically 2 minutes playing at the same time. It may sound a bit weird, so listen to the audio sample. First you're gonna hear that section how it's supposed to be.
So many quotes, how to succeed, not one to soothe the taste of defeat, who just try.
And then you're gonna hear the mistake on the CD.
So many quotes, how to succeed, not one to soothe the taste of defeat. So
When I heard it, I was absolutely devastated. And when something like this happens, there are basically 2 options. It can be a manufacturing fault, which is a better option because you send it back and they repair the mistake. Or it can be your mistake. So actually, when you create a DDP file for the audio, you have the PDF screenshot of all of the information that's going to be visible on a CD. Like, for example, you put it in some hi-fi system, it's going to show you the names of the tracks, but the computer can show you all of the other information. And that's when I noticed that the first track, Vortex Fragoris, instead of 25 minutes and 39 seconds, it had, I think, 24 minutes and 11 seconds. And I was like, that producer, he made a mistake. I don't know how. He was kind of flabbergasted when I called him. He was like, how could this happen? I wanted to take all of those CDs, go out in the garden, set them on fire, and have nothing to do with this record ever again. I was like, why is this happening to me? So I asked the manufacturing company, like, what are the solutions? And basically the only solution was to have a new order for just the discs that they would send me, and I would have to manually change the CDs. I was smart about it though, because here you can see the original disc with the mistake, and you can have something written in that inner circle, and there was Iako Bei 2 Pursuits in Life. With the new order, I changed what is written there just so that it's easier to differentiate between the wrong disc and the right disc. So the new disc that has no mistake actually has Iako Bei 2. And in a way this is nice because Iako Bei 2 is a better continuation of how the first album was, because on the first record we had just Iako Bei written there. I guess things are the way they're supposed to be. Not sure if It's easy to look at that like that. They were actually very cool. They gave me a better price, but it still was over 300 euros worth of a mistake. Some of you may be wondering like, okay, but that producer, he should have paid for it. He's actually a very good guy. I called him. Obviously, he didn't pay me 300 euros. It was actually over, I don't remember how much, but it was over 300 euros. He didn't pay for it, but he was cool enough to buy me a plugin, which is like 100 euros that you can use for creating DDP. And he gave me a lesson how to do it. From now on in the future, I can do it on my own. And that's not all. We're going to one of the more recent stories. At the end of 2023, we had a release party for the second album. I came to the guy who owns the place, and that's the same place where we shot all of the band shots from the Fan Haters music video. And I told him, look, you allowed us to shoot here the music video. I don't want any money for the gig, but I don't want any expenses. The biggest expenses usually are the sound equipment and the sound guy, so sound in general. And he was like, don't worry about it. We have a guy who works here. He's a drummer. He's got his own equipment. He is the sound guy and he is in charge of the sound for almost all of the gigs we have here. I was like, it's settled then. Like a week before the gig, the drummer Jacob called me and he was like, do they have those clip-on microphones for drums? And I was like, I'm pretty sure they do. Please, can you call them? Please call them. Find out if they do have it. So I was like, okay, so I called him. I was like, do you have like this mic set for the drums? He was like, of course we do. I'm like, okay, cool, because the drummer is freaking out. I mean, we could probably borrow it from someone, but I don't think we would be able to set them up. But I'm pretty sure that your sound guy wouldn't have any problems with that, even if he didn't have them. And he was like, what do you mean sound guy? You have your own sound guy. And I was like, what do you mean? We agreed that you're gonna provide the sound equipment and the sound guy. And he was like, no, just the sound equipment. What the hell? Like, how the fuck could this happen? And this was 1 week before the gig. I pulled a few strings, but their sound guy actually, he was like, nobody told me about it. I already have different plans. What to do in a situation like this? So I found a sound guy who did the gig for us, but almost all of the money, more than what we collected from people's tickets, I had to pay him. Plus the sound was terrible. In a way, you can say that's almost like poetic or artistic ending of the record. It's just unbelievable how many things went wrong. Okay, here's a bonus for you. My Biggest Foe, the music video, actually has the song in a worse quality than the official audio, or well, anywhere else you listen to the song is gonna have a better quality. The reason for that is I think that when we made the music video, there were probably 2 tracks containing the song, and when they play at the same time, the quality is reduced. I was alone for all of this, so I didn't notice it. Okay, so there you have it. Very few people would be able to pull it off. From a certain point of view, I'm very proud of it. But please, I never want to go through anything like this again, because this was the most difficult thing ever. But at the end of the day, if you have some cool stories to share, I guess then it was worth it. So that's it. Thanks a lot for watching. And think twice before making art.